Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. In Kashmir, Pakistan army posts opened fire along the line of control, triggering a response from Indian troops. NIA is to probe the attack as search operations continue in multiple areas. Iran offers to mediate, while Pakistan's army chief reiterates the two-nation theory. A massive blast in Iran's largest port kills 18 people and injures over 700. Officials believe poorly stored chemicals caused the explosion, but it's too early to confirm. Iran and the US agree to continue nuclear talks, with discussions expected to resume next week. Donald Trump signals confidence in a deal, while Iran insists on maintaining uranium enrichment and defensive capabilities. US President Donald Trump criticizes his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Truth Social amid war mediation efforts. This may suggest a shift in his position following a historic meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Rome. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky holds talks with French President Macron, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni after meeting with Donald Trump. Leaders discuss progress towards a peace deal and commit to continuing efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Leaders make final campaign pitches in Canada's federal election, where US President Donald Trump remains a strong factor. Polls tighten as young Canadians lean towards Conservatives despite the Trump threat. President Donald Trump demands that American military and commercial ships travel through the Panama and Suez canals free of charge. The US President directs Secretary of State Marco Rubio to address the issue immediately. Indian police detained 1,024 people in a crackdown of illegal immigrants in Gujarat. The government says these detained individuals are Bangladeshi migrants and comes amid growing tensions with Pakistan. We begin with our ongoing coverage of Kashmir. Tensions are flaring up once again along the line of control. Overnight, unprovoked small arms firing was reported from Pakistani posts across areas like Lipa and Neelam valleys. Indian troops responded firmly. No casualties have been reported. In the aftermath of the Pahalgam terror attack, Indian security forces have demolished the houses of 8 terrorists across Jammu and Kashmir. The National Investigation Agency will now lead the probe into the attack. Meanwhile, Iranian President Massoud has declared support for India against terrorism. Just a day ago, Iran also offered to mediate in the growing India-Pakistan tensions. Security operations are continuing in multiple districts, including Tral, Anantnag, Pulwama, Kulgam and Shopian. In another development, Pakistan's army chief has once again invoked the controversial two-nation theory. And in a major diplomatic move, India's decision to cancel all existing visas of Pakistani citizens comes into force today. Medical visas will remain valid only until April the 29th. We are joined by Brian Thomas, correspondent, live from Srinagar in Kashmir. Brian, what updates can you give us on this developing situation amid rising tensions between India and Pakistan?
Well, clearly, if we talk about the ground situation, yes, we are on our way to Shopian itself, where a house was raised itself of an active militant, Adnan Shafi, who of Wadina Zainapura, whose house was destroyed just yesterday itself. He joined the militant ranks before 1 year, and yes, there have been much tensions between both India and Pakistan itself after the deteriorating diplomatic tensions also that India has downgraded against Pakistan. There have been many such explosive statements also from Pakistan ministers against India itself. But clearly on ground, the security forces have been working round the clock, 24/7 and keeping a vigil. And also, They are in an attempt to eliminate the militants. They are raising the houses of the militants who have been active in such terror activities. Now we are, yes, clearly on our way to Shopian district also, where one such house was clearly, was raised. And even Pakistan again violated the ceasefire also by firing itself on the very LOC itself. So yes, clearly there have been much violations from the Pakistan side. There have been much explosive statements from the Pakistani ministers. Even they were talking about the two-nation theory. So yes, clearly the dynamics have been deteriorating. But yes, the security forces, the JNK police, the CRPF, the paramilitary forces, even the Indian Army have been vigilant, working 24/7 round the clock to ensure everything happens in a proper place and there is peace maintained in the region itself.
Brian, what are the thoughts of the diplomatic moves on the ground that India has made so far? Obviously, the Indus Water Treaty has been suspended, and today is when the visas of Pakistani nationals run out. What are the thoughts of the people in the region?
Well, clearly, those locals in Kashmir, they are in, if you talk about the ground situation where we are, it will be very safe to say that most of the locals here itself in Kashmir, they are standing against the terror attack that has happened. They are with the people also, they are also condemning this very incident that has happened. And even clearly, the NIA has now taken control and taken probe of the Pahalgam attack that had happened. Yes, clearly there were a few days back, the NIA team was also dispatched from Delhi to, maintain, to give progress reports also, of the situation there. And now, clearly just now, the NIA has taken full control over the situation. And talking about the diplomatic tension, yes, there have been very stern steps taken by India, and also there have been much international support also, from world leaders, from other countries also to India against the terror attack that has happened and that jolted Kashmir, and not just Kashmir, but the entire nation itself.
Yes, Brian Thomas, thank you very much for joining us. We will continue to bring you all developments coming live from Kashmir directly. Now we move over to the Middle East, where a devastating explosion rocked Iran's largest commercial port, Shahid, Rajaee, on Saturday. At least 14 people have been confirmed dead and more than 750 others are injured. The blast, which occurred near the strategic Strait of Hormuz, is believed to have been caused by a fire at a hazardous chemical storage depot. Reports suggest that sodium, a missile fuel ingredient, may have been involved. The explosion sparked a massive blaze with thick smoke spreading across the area. Rescue teams are working to contain the fire, but strong winds are hindering efforts. Hundreds of victims have been rushed to nearby hospitals and a blood donation drive has been launched. Iranian officials are investigating the cause of the tragedy, while the Iranian president has expressed condolences and offered an inquiry. Authorities have closed schools and offices in nearby Bandar Abbas as emergency operations continue. We are joined by our guest today, Ross Feingold, political risk analyst. Ross, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, we were hit with the striking visuals of this explosion yesterday in one of Iran's most valuable ports. What effect is this going to have on trade in the area? Okay, apologies, we've had some technical issues there. We move to North America now, where Canada heads to the polls this Monday in a pivotal election that could reshape the country's political future. Mark Carney's Liberal Party is fighting to hold on to power against a surging Conservative movement led by Pierre Poilievre. To secure a win, the Liberals will need to draw support from across the political spectrum, including voters abandoning the collapsing New Democrats, the Bloc Québécois, and even the Greens. There's been another presence looming over this election, one that's not even on the ballot, and that is US President Donald Trump. His return to office south of the border has cast a long shadow across the campaign trail in Canada. David Perry, president of Canadian Global Affairs, summed it up, saying, and I quote, President Donald Trump pretends to suck up almost all the oxygen here. As the campaign efforts enters its final hours, all candidates have delivered their closing speeches. The Liberals have governed since 2015, first under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who stepped down earlier this year. Since then, the Conservatives have led the polls by double digits, until Trudeau's resignation and Trump's re-election shifted the momentum. Now, with the Liberals back on the rise, the stakes are higher than ever. The New Democrats risk losing official party status if they can't reach the 12-seat threshold. The Bloc Québécois, meanwhile, is fighting to maintain its stronghold in Quebec, defending a 30-plus seat bloc built up since 2019. It's an election that could redraw the lines of Canadian politics, and the outcome may rest on where the votes fall outside the traditional left-right divide. Let's listen in to what the leaders had to say in the final campaigns.
And we will back the trades, and we will make sure that any young person in this country that wants to get into the trades will be encouraged to do so, and we will tell them that the best jobs in the future are going to be in the trades. It's not.
We can win this election with your help. You've all given so much, but I'm going to use my hockey analogy again. We are down to 2 minutes in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. Please leave everything on the ice. So a few more door knocks, a few more phone calls, a few more conversations, a few more conversions. We want everyone possible to support us, regardless of which party they...
My message, first of all, to workers in potential negotiations going forward, I want you to know my number one priority is you. I'm going to be fighting to make sure you are the priority. We have often heard and seen in crises that it is workers who are asked to sacrifice. It's workers who are forced to tighten their belt, and I think that is wrong. It should not be on the backs of workers that we fight this trade war, and so my commitment to workers is I'm going to always put you first. My message to Donald Trump is, without any reason, without any provocation, in an illegal manner, you've attacked our country. But we're going to fight back and defend our interests. We are strong, we are proud, and we're going to fight back.
Yes, so we are awaiting the coverage of the election tomorrow, with the polls tightening between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Mark Carney obviously leading the Liberals, which in most polls he has seen a slight advantage over Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, who is trailing behind, but only slightly in most of the recent polls. Jagmeet Singh's New Democratic Party is not doing so well, with only 10% of the vote in most polls. But we will try and we will certainly see tomorrow what that situation is. Mainly looking like a two-horse race between Poilievre and Carney to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. However, we will see tomorrow in the election, the federal election of Canada. We move to the Middle East, where a devastating explosion rocked Iran's largest commercial port, Shahid, Rajaee, on Saturday. At least 14 people have been confirmed dead, and more than 750 others are injured. The blast, which occurred near the strategic Strait of Hormuz, is believed to have been caused by a fire at a hazardous chemical storage depot. Reports suggest that sodium perchlorate, a missile fuel ingredient, may have been involved. The explosion sparked a massive blaze with thick smoke spreading across the area. Rescue teams are working to contain the fire, but strong winds are hindering efforts. Hundreds of victims have been rushed to nearby hospitals, and a blood donation drive has been launched. Iranian officials are investigating the cause of the tragedy, while the Iranian president has expressed condolences and offered an inquiry. Authorities have closed schools and offices in nearby Bandar Abbas as emergency operations continue. We are joined by Ross Feingold, political risk analyst located in Taipei, Taiwan, to discuss this further. Ross, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, these were very striking visuals coming yesterday out of the Iran port site. What are the likely implications on trade in the region that this explosion is going to cause?
Of course, the Iranian government rushed to say operations have returned to normal, but that really remains to be seen. Keeping in mind that Iran is not a place with an independent media, so much of the messaging that comes from the official media is really the only messaging that we outside of Iran can get. So it really remains to be seen what the actual effect on port operations is.
Yes, so Ross, what do you think the economic implications are for Iran? This was a significant port which was subject to a cyber attack in 2020. This obviously isn't being treated as suspicious currently, but what will be the economic effects of an explosion like this?
This really depends on how much resiliency the port operations have, how much additional space or backup space they have for loading or unloading ships, for storage of goods or fuel. So that's also something that we're still trying to get a grasp on. It could disrupt port operations for a significant period of time, but as I said, it really depends on how much resiliency has been built into port operations.
Yes, and how significant is this order for an inquiry, and how independent is such an investigation likely to be?
Well, we're talking about a country that lacks transparency in how the government goes about its business. We really have no way of knowing how independent or accurate any kind of investigation would be. Up to now, they haven't requested foreign assistance in the investigation, which is probably something that they actually need. So absent an independent media, absent opposition members of the parliament who could conduct oversight over the government, it's hard to be optimistic that there will be a real transparent investigation.
And obviously the Shahid Rajaee port is a key factor in oil exports. How will this affect the shipping routes for global oil trade?
If there's any disruption, then certainly it means that Iran could potentially lose many millions of dollars in revenue, and that's revenue that they desperately need. So if they cannot ship out their oil, then customers are going to turn to other sources around the region or from other places in the world. So the economic risk to the Iranian government can't be understated, again, absent knowing how much additional port space and oil and fuel storage space they actually have at the facility, which is something that remains to be seen.
Ross, this obviously comes in the backdrop of the US-Iran negotiations. How will this explosion could possibly affect Iran's weaponry capabilities?
We don't know if Iran is going to put the blame on foreign forces. I mean, that would obviously mean Israel or the United States. It's unlikely that the United States would have any need to sabotage Iranian ports, especially during negotiations in which the parties have returned for multiple rounds. So the negotiations, although they haven't reached a positive conclusion, they've continued. And by itself, I guess that's a positive. So the only likely foreign source would be Israel. But again, with the United States engaged in negotiations with Iran, I think it's extraordinarily unlikely that Israel would seek to sabotage Iranian port at this time. But again, the risk to the government of lost revenue is certainly significant.
Yes, Ross Feingold, thank you very much for joining us. We now move over to Europe, where in a significant development, US President Donald Trump has raised doubts about Russian President Vladimir Putin's willingness to end the war in Ukraine. This followed a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at Pope Francis's funeral. Trump expressed skepticism on Truth Social, questioning Putin's intentions after missile attacks on Ukrainian cities. Trump has raised concerns over Russia's missile strikes on civilian areas, suggesting secondary sanctions may be necessary if Russia continues its attacks, adding pressure for a peace resolution. Meanwhile, Zelensky called his talks with Trump productive, discussing a ceasefire and a lasting peace. The meeting was their first face-to-face encounter since February's heated White House confrontation. Meanwhile, in Rome, Zelensky met EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. She assured Ukraine of continued EU support, saying that they can count on assistance in negotiations from the European Union. The talks focused on Ukraine's EU membership and security amid Russia's ongoing aggression. Following the meeting, Zelensky met UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They discussed Ukraine's peace efforts, military support, and the need for a lasting ceasefire to ensure security and sovereignty. Here's what Zelensky had to say.
To a lot of details, if it's possible, because the questions, very sensitive questions on, of course, totally it's about how to bring peace closer and how was resultative, positive Paris and London, and we want to continue such meetings to bring peace to Ukraine.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni also met with Zelensky in Rome, urging Moscow to commit to peace talks. Meloni condemned recent Russian attacks and stressed the need for an unconditional ceasefire. Meanwhile, the Kremlin announced that President Putin is ready to engage in peace talks with Ukraine without preconditions, signalling a potential shift in Russia's stance towards negotiating an end to the conflict. We once again move back over to the Middle East, where US and Iranian officials described their nuclear talks in Oman as positive and productive. The third round of discussions, which were held in Muscat, lasted over 4 hours. A senior US administration official stated that while much remains to be done, progress was made towards a deal. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi acknowledged that differences persist, both on major issues and on details. He emphasized that the seriousness of this round of talks with a focus on a more technical discussion and written exchanges. Araghchi expressed satisfaction with the pace and process of the negotiations. However, he noted that not all disagreements have been resolved. The discussions come amid ongoing efforts to address Iran's nuclear program, which has remained a point of tension between Tehran and Washington. Here's what Iran's foreign minister had to say.
مجموع میتونم عرض بکنم که فضای مذاکره یک فضای کاملا جدی و کاری بود. یه مقداری از بحث‌های کلان فاصله گرفتیم. این معنیش نیست که ما اختلافات همه حل شده. نه. هم در موضوعات کلان اختلافات وجود داره، هم در جزئیات وجود داره. تا جلسه بعدی قرار هست که بررسی‌های بیشتری در پایتخت. من از روند مذاکرات، از روند به اصطلاح شکل‌گیری مذاکره و سرعتش راضی هستم. فکر میکنم که روند خوب و رضایت بخشی رو داره. مذاکرات این بار خیلی جدی تر از گذشته بود و ما به تدریج وارد بعضی از بحث‌های جزئی تر، فنی تر، تکنیکی تر شدیم. حضور کارشناسان بسیار مفید بود. ما چندین بار به صورت مکتوب نظراتمون رو رد و بدل کردیم. مذاکرات خب غیر مستقیم هست، میدونید. بحث‌های فنی یه مقدار دقت‌های خودش رو میخواد، لذا عمدتاً به صورت مکتوب مواضع.
Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad Al Busadi confirmed that talks would continue next week with potential high-level meetings planned. We are once again joined by Ross Feingold, political risk analyst, to discuss this further once again. Ross, Donald Trump seems to have very much confidence in this deal. Iran has obviously assured that it won't be stopping enriching uranium. Is that confidence justified from the American president?
Most of all, that's probably President Trump's negotiating style. He usually expresses optimism about negotiations that he's involved in. But the positive thing is that the two parties have gone through multiple rounds and are ready to have another round of discussion. So there seems to be something to talk about. There seems to be some common views on the core issues. But again, as you said, the ultimate issue is whether or not Iran is going to maintain its enrichment capabilities.
Yes, and Ross, what do you think of the style of these meetings? Obviously, they have been indirect with the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Iran's top diplomat Araghchi, sometimes not directly meeting. What would you say about the style of the talks that have taken place?
it seems to be working. Again, the fact that they've had multiple rounds and they're willing, both sides are willing to do this again, seems to indicate that having an interlocutor go back and forth between the two sides, so maintaining an indirect conversation, but they're still having a conversation, although it's through the interlocutor, it seems to be working, and I think we should all view that as a positive.
Yes, and Tehran says its missile program and defense capabilities are non-negotiable. Do you think any meaningful deal can be reached if such major security issues are off the table completely?
Makes it very, very difficult to reach a deal. It really depends on how much the United States and allies of the United States will be asking for. If they're asking for an end to enrichment, that's one thing. But if they're asking for an end to enrichment and restrictions on Iran's missile programs, now they're asking for a lot more. And especially coming at a time where we've seen Israel and Iran engage in hostilities over the past year, it's going to be very difficult to persuade Iran to impose restrictions on their missile program. So in that respect, I'm going to be pessimistic about reaching a deal, even though there seems to be reason to be optimistic on the uranium enrichment side.
Yes, and Ross, it's those regional tensions I want to focus on next, especially with Israel and the Gulf states. How would a possible deal impact the broader Middle East security landscape?
The reality is, when it comes to restrictions on Iran's nuclear weapons program, uranium enrichment, or on its missile programs, generally speaking, Israel and the Gulf states, they have a similar view. They see eye to eye. They don't want Iran to continue to enrich uranium up to the levels that the uranium could be used in nuclear weapons. They don't want to see Iran further develop its missile program. So although they might not say so publicly, it's clear that Israel and the Gulf states have common views when it comes to the core issues that are being negotiated at the moment between the United States and Iran.
Ross Feingold, thank you once again for your very valuable insight. We have some breaking news coming in from the same region. The death toll from the massive explosion at Iran's Shahid Rajaee port has increased to 18, with now over 800 people now reported as being injured. Emergency response teams continue to assess the situation and provide medical assistance. Authorities are investigating the cause of the blast, which occurred on Saturday, and further updates will follow as the situation develops. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more international news updates.